whatsoever to other countries in cases of tax evasion, which is in
but they
most of the countries a criminal. It is a crime in most of the countries. And that means actually that even when the tax authorities are behind someone and they know exactly that this person has stashed their wealth in Switzerland, is not paying their taxes in their home country where they earned that money actually, and where it should be taxed because it was earned there. And they cannot get any information from Switzerland. And that money,
other countries shouldn't be trying to tax money that's in Switzerland.
Because it's not a business of Swiss law, because it has been taken from, it should have been taxed where it has been produced, and it wasn't. And we're talking about 2,500 billion
and then
Swiss
if people
francs.
Take their after-tax income and move it to Switzerland, that's now Swiss business. Let me give you an example. European countries will not help the U.S. enforce death penalty cases. Now, you can argue whether that's good or bad, but the point is countries always choose what laws of other nations they enforce. When Tiananmen Square protesters escaped from China to the U.S., we didn't return them to China. Why? Because free speech isn't against the law in the U.S. And likewise, if money is earned, say, in France, you pay tax on it in France, you have after-tax income, you then move it to Switzerland, it should no longer be any business of the French government because that money is outside their borders.
That's not the case. That's not the case, because that money is not taxed in France. It is earned black. It is transferred to Switzerland before it is taxed, and it is not taxed in the country of origin. Any income that is earned
after the money goes to Switzerland, any money that's earned after the money goes to Switzerland, that is Swiss business. It should not be the business of other countries.
Hold on. I'm going to have to interrupt you both here. Jean has had a comment. I'm trying to give equal time to each panelist. Go ahead, Jean.
Daniel, I think you have to admit that tax evasion is a kind of robbery on public revenue. I mean, you're just escaping the social contract of a nation. So are you just telling us that when there's robbery of public revenue, it shouldn't be sued if it goes across the borders? Is that what you're telling us?
What I'm saying is that if a country like France taxes at 60 to 70%, that's the robbery. And I don't blame the millions of French people that are protecting their money in the Channel Islands and Luxembourg and Switzerland and New York and Cayman. The way to reduce tax evasion, as even the IMF and OECD agree, is to lower tax rates. Now, Sarkozy has taken a tiny step in that direction, but he needs to go a lot farther.
Okay, I'd like to switch gears a bit here and actually talk about what the EU or some EU members have now proposed in order to crack down on the tax havens that they feel are a major problem. Alex, the idea of blacklisting a country like Switzerland or Luxembourg, for example, does it help at all?
I think it can do if there are serious sanctions behind it. Where we've seen this approach tried before, there haven't been serious sanctions and so little has been gained. What's happened is that some jurisdictions, in order to get off the blacklist, have changed their regulation, but not actually the way that they do business. So although technically their legal system appears to be better, in practice they're not providing any more information to other governments. I'd like to agree, if I can, with just one thing that Daniel said, and it really is just the one thing that I agree with, which is that if the EU Savings Tax Directive goes ahead, as I suggest, and is expanded in the way I've said, it is true that it will drive some dirty money out of Europe. Now, on the one hand, I think Europe might be a better place without that dirty money. But on the other hand, Daniel's right that ultimately we need a global solution to this problem because it is a global problem. We must include the developing world. We must also include havens such as Hong Kong and Singapore. We must include the US. And on that, we have some positive news that if Obama was to be elected, we know that he has sponsored a bill in the Senate called the Stop Tax Haven Abuse Act, which is very positive in taking a hard line on tax havens. So it's not impossible that come early next year, we may see something of a global coalition that really is willing to put the political will and the necessary sanctions behind the blacklist and really make it work to stop this antisocial behaviour by tax havens.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we're down to our last few minutes, and I wanted to include the response out of Luxembourg to, this is what when France proposed its crackdown on tax haven statuses. France particularly pointed the finger at Luxembourg. Germany went and pointed the finger more strongly at Switzerland. But this was Luxembourg's response. I find it interesting. This is the Prime Minister, Jean-Claude Juncker.
France is no better than Luxembourg in terms of financial morality. We are happy to talk about the virtues of banking secrecy, and I don't believe that every aspect of it is a good thing. I'm completely open to talking about banking secrecy or other systems of international compensation. I'm not about to put myself in the dock over it.
Okay, Andreas, a similar kind of response as well out of Switzerland that's absolutely rejected Germany pointing the finger at the Swiss. What do you make of that? I mean, because the Swiss are now arguing, what will Switzerland be without its banking sector, its secrecy, and its tax haven status?
Well, actually, this is a bit contradictory by Swiss authorities, because on one side they say we don't rely on tax haven status, on the other side they say, oh, what will going to be when we don't have it anymore? And everybody knows in Switzerland that some banks will lose. There are some small private banks going back to the capital flight after the French Revolution. Those banks, they won't have a future if Switzerland gives up this artificial distinction between tax evasion and tax fraud. But not the big banks, not the whole banking system. There are other areas in banking that are highly developed, high skills in Switzerland, and those will definitely remain.
Okay, Jean, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I would partly agree with Juncker, because this is a limit of the blacklisting exercise. I mean, we can point our fingers towards Luxembourg and Switzerland and Jersey and Guernsey, etc. But the real decisions to put the money there is taken in Paris, in London, in Frankfurt, and it's the fact of individuals, of societies, etc. So I think the sanctions could be taken not only towards those territories, but also to the actors right here that put their money there.
Everyone has to self-evaluate. Okay, Jean, you will have the final word, because unfortunately we are now completely out of time for this edition of the debate. I would like to thank all four of our panelists so much for joining us. Daniel, I know you had a thought there you wanted to express. I'm sorry, the clock is against us. So thanks again. Thanks to our viewers, for tuning in as well. That is all for tonight. Another edition tomorrow. Do join us then. Bonsoir.